Consequences of social engineering. Social engineering is part of 80% of attacks. It is a very prevalent method that allows hackers to gain access to sensitive information. So what are the stakes here? First, we have loss of data. This can include anything, but typically we're talking about sensitive data, which could be anything from personal information to company secrets. In many cases, the loss of this type of information is devastating to an organization, and many don't even recover from a breach. This is one of the reasons why a breached organization may not recover. Once breached, customer confidence wanes, and they may have trouble getting new customers or even getting vendors to work with them. Between lawsuits and remediation costs, dealing with a breach is an expensive proposition. According to a report published by IBM, the current average cost of a breach is just over $4 million. Cybersecurity events cause complete disruption to an organization, from IT shutting down affected systems to the legal department preparing to defend the company, to auditors, insurance agents, forensic investigators, and law enforcement being part of the scene. It may be difficult, if not impossible, to get any work done for some time. One of the biggest problems with breaches is that they can easily cause identity theft. This happens when personal information is stolen and then shared online or sold to other attackers. This information can include medical details or credit card information, or even a person's social security number. This leads to possible credit card accounts being opened under the victim's social security number and quickly maxed out before the victim even knows what happened. An even more sinister problem is when an attacker files taxes on your behalf. The taxes are completely made up, and the attacker files them in such a way as to get a refund from the IRS. Eventually, the victim goes to file the same tax return, which is rejected by the IRS. Imagine trying to unwind that mess. IRS doesn't take phone calls, and explaining to them that you didn't file the other return requires legal and accounting intervention. Worse yet, since a fraudulent return was filed under your name, the IRS may actually audit you as a result. Lastly, impersonation is another problem. Here we have scenarios where various services may be used by an attacker using a victim's social security number. These services may be food stamps, may be school-related programs, or other government-run programs. Imagine any of these scenarios, and now think about how to unwind and reverse the damage. Once something is on the internet, it tends to stay there, so it's very difficult to undo what was done, and it may take years to fully recover one's credit or identity. There are also no guarantees that it wouldn't happen again either. In our demo, we briefly looked at how easy it could be to perform an insider threat attack. There's various motivation for this, but typically an insider threat is an employee of the organization that he or she is attacking, and that employee typically has malicious intent. Some of the reasons for this could be because they feel they were wronged in some way, or because competitors paying them to retrieve company secrets. Bottom line is that insider threat is very difficult to identify because anyone who's working at the company can be the attacker. Okay, so how do we defend ourselves? Well, that is the discussion we're going to have next as we talk about the countermeasures for social engineering. Social engineering countermeasures. So let's talk a little bit about what we can do to prevent social engineering attacks. First, and probably most important, is security awareness training. This is one of the best methods for preventing attack. Education allows potential victims to identify the attack and avoid it. Security awareness training should include modules on phishing and physical social engineering techniques, such as shoulder surfing and tailgating. To prevent insider threats, it's best to have a solid set of policies and procedures that everyone must follow. This would include HR-related procedures such as background checks for all employees done on an annual basis. Job rotation is a great way to help with separation of duties, while mandatory vacations can help identify malicious activities. Other policies such as clean desk and strong password policy help keep an organization's data safe. In the event that your account is compromised, having a strong two-factor authentication mechanism for all of your accounts that support it may be the difference between a breach and a foiled attempt. It is a great defense against continually rising phishing and rogue website attacks. Lastly, every job role should be given permission that are just enough to complete the necessary work. The principle of least privilege requires that users only have the permission they need and nothing more. With other defenses in place such as job rotation, strong password policy, and two-factor authentication, even if someone's account is compromised, the exposure to the organization should not be greater than allowed by the permissions of the compromised account. Now let's talk a little bit about physical security. First, there are man traps. The idea here is that you walk through an intermediary room where you must be alone. It may be done in such a way as to only allow one person to fit comfortably. You end up walking into the man trap and closing the door behind you, then opening the door in front of you and proceeding through. Think of it as an airlock. This greatly reduces the chances of having a tailgater enter with you. It also takes the psychological aspect of courtesy from the situation. You may want to hold the door for someone whose hands are full and let them through, but with a man trap, the protocol is clear and you can't do it. Bollards are those metal or cement pillars that we see typically in front of glass doors and windows. This type of defense prevents cars from jumping the curb and driving through the glass door. Surveillance is another great physical security measure. For example, you could use cameras to see if anyone is dumpster diving behind your building and address it. And proper logs show visitors and others who have had access to the building. These types of security measures may act as a deterrent and also provide basic detective controls for an organization. Biometrics is another option. These tend to verify the individual in question. Let's look at those in a bit more detail. You may recall the three factors of authentication. They are what you know, what you have, and what you are. Passwords are part of the what you know group. Keycards and two-factor authentication fall into the category of what you have. And lastly, biometrics fill that role of what you are. First up is fingerprint scanner. This is very common and we frequently see it as a means of authentication. It is convenient and typically fast and rarely fails. It can be tricked using a high-resolution photo of a fingerprint, but getting that is difficult at best, although not impossible. The iris scan looks for patterns within an eye's iris. The pattern is unique and can be matched to a specific person. Iris scan is reliable, but is a more expensive technology and not frequently seen. A retina scan is also based on the eye. It looks at the placement of your optic nerve, which is also unique and can be used to identify the person. As with the iris scan, it is a more expensive technology and not often seen in the corporate world. VoicePrint is the last option on this menu. It isn't as reliable as the other options on this list, although is as easy to use as a fingerprint scanner. The problem with the VoicePrint is that they can be tricked relatively easily with pre-recorded phrases, and additionally, your voice may change. For example, if you have a sore throat or a cold, you may not sound exactly the same, and this may lead you to be stuck outside. Okay, let's review what we discussed in this module through a learning check. Okay, ready? What do we call a set of cement pillars that you'll find in front of most supermarket entrances? If you said bollards, you would be correct. Name the biometric option that reads your voice. Okay, that's VoicePrint. Now, we talked about a tool that can be used to create a wireless access point attack or give you a reverse shell by leveraging PowerShell. What's the name of that tool? Yes, it's the Social Engineering Toolkit. And last but not least, what is the best defense that we have against social engineering attacks today? It's security awareness training. At present, there's no better way of preventing social engineering attacks than education. We began this module with a closer look at rogue websites. We learned that using tools like the Social Engineering Toolkit, we can easily craft complex attacks and deploy them. These types of attacks can easily lead to identity theft and insider threats. We looked at how an employee may use the Social Engineering Toolkit to obtain the credentials of a supervisor or an administrative user, and we've discussed the various ways by which identity theft can lead to fraud. We then looked at countermeasures such as security awareness training, benefits of two-factor authentication, and policies and procedures. We discussed physical security as well and learned that man traps, bollards, and surveillance can be used to minimize or prevent an attack. Last but not least, we looked at biometric access controls, which are part of the 3 authentication factors known as what you are. These include fingerprint scans, iris scans, retina scans, and voice prints. Next, we'll review the entire social engineering domain. See you in the next module.